Town meeting. It's grassroots democracy at its finest, its supporters say, and burned deeply into the political DNA of Vermont, one of the few states left where town and school district officials and the people and taxpayers they represent and work for come face to face in front of the whole community and questions get answers. But this year, like everything else, town meeting, in its traditional setting, a floor meeting at the town hall or some other public location, has been upended by the COVID-19 pandemic. State officials have already passed legislation, Act 162, which allows a legislative body like a school district or a municipality to use Australian balloting for any annual or special town meeting in 2021. All the items that voters would normally have approved, or not, through a show of hands from the floor, may have to be done by a paper ballot. Towns have flexibility in how they want to do this, and the legislature is planning other measures to help local officials navigate through the process, said Representative John Gannon of Wilmington, who serves as the vice chairman of the Government Operations Committee.
One of the things about the legislation we passed last session and that we hope to pass this session is, we're not trying to tie anybody's hands as to what they can do or not do, but we want to give them options. So, for example, last session, we passed a bill that allows select boards by December 30th of this year to determine whether to hold town meeting by Australian ballot. That's a choice of the select board. If they don't want to do it, they don't have to. So that's already passed. Some towns, including the town I live in, Wilmington, have already made that decision to move to Australian ballot. Obviously, the benefit there is not bringing people together during the pandemic and, hopefully protecting people. What we have been working on in the House and in Senate Government Operations is a new bill which would authorize municipalities to move the date of their 2021 annual meeting to hopefully a time where people are vaccinated or the pandemic has decreased a lot, or finally, you can hold a meeting outside and allow for social distancing. The other option that we are giving municipalities is the ability to mail out annual meeting Australian ballots. And tied to that is, we've heard from the administration that they will be seeking money for towns to actually mail out ballots during the budget adjustment process that will start in January. And finally, we're authorizing the Secretary of State to order, to do anything supplemental for election procedures to make sure that town meeting 2021 goes as smoothly as possible. If they choose to move to Australian ballot, what would happen is that they could hold a virtual informational meeting. That typically happens, where, municipalities or school districts are already operating by Australian ballot. They'll have an informational meeting. People can look at the warning and the articles, ask questions about the various articles to either the school board or the select board, and hopefully get answers before they actually have to vote by Australian ballot. So that can be done virtually. Or if you're just, interested in a question, you obviously can call up a select board member or a school board member and just ask.
It's likely that Manchester will opt for an Australian ballot vote on the town budget and other line items, as well as voting for candidates for public office. John OKeefe, Manchester's town manager, gave us the rundown on their thinking in a recent conversation.
The board at the last meeting said that they were leaning very strongly towards an Australian ballot town meeting. We did discuss other options. One of them was to actually meet in the grandstand of Applejack. But again, the early March, you could have a day when it was 60 degrees that time of year, or you could have a day when it's negative 30. Traditionally, it's been, the election of town officers, obviously. And then any appropriation over $2,500, bonded items, what else would usually go on there? Those are the big ones. So now, there's going to Australian ballot is not a simple process. For example, on the town budget, which is voted on by the floor on Saturday, people can make changes to that. Now, the only options would be yes or no. There's not a maybe box, obviously, and you can't write in anything. So
would there be any way for a discussion of any of these items, like maybe on Zoom or some kind of platform where town officials could say, well, here's the town budget. We're spending X amount on this and Y amount on that, and here's why, and that's how we got to the bottom line, that sort of thing. There wouldn't be a vote, but you could at least have a way of explaining how the numbers got to be the way they were.
So we're looking actually at having an informational town meeting, maybe even more than a week out from town meeting, from the actual election, via Zoom. Obviously, it's not perfect, but we've got a sort of a backup plan for that. But we'd have an interactive meeting via Zoom, and then we would record that meeting and actually play it on GNAT. So even if you didn't have access to Zoom, some people don't, you could still go back and watch the material. And of course, you'll get your town report as well. But yeah, there would be an informational meeting where we actually go through all of the different items.
For the broader statewide picture, we turn to Karen Horn, the Director of Public Policy and Advocacy for the Vermont League of Cities and Towns.
You will be able to have the informational meeting online on Zoom, and that is a select board meeting. It's convened by the select board and the school board, so it's subject to open meeting, and you can hold that meeting remotely according to the provisions that the legislature passed last year. The town meeting itself is a meeting of the citizens and the registered voters of the town. It's not a meeting of the select board. So it has different requirements. The legislature said before they left, as part of Act 162, that the local legislative body, the select board, can vote to hold everything by Australian ballot. And they sort of left it there. So then what we felt like we really need is for towns to be able to mail Australian ballots to their registered voters, which is not something that the statute allows. You will also be able to change the date of your meeting, so you could move it from March all the way to May, for instance, under a provision that the legislature is proposing. So that will be very helpful for some towns, and Dummerston is one town that's considering doing that. We have a number of towns that are trying to finagle a way so that you could at least convene the town meeting in person and elect your moderator, for instance, in person, and then put everything else onto the Australian ballot. Some small towns are looking at that, how that might work for them. Kirby is one such town, Glover's another, that, there are some towns that would really like to have the in-person aspect of town meeting and feel like if they give it up this year, that we might have lost your in-person democracy at the local levels for all time, because it will be just easier in the future to do Australian ballots for everything. And then you don't have the conversation on the floor.
Vaccines for COVID-19 may be on their way, but it will still be a while before things return to normal. Figuring out a pathway through town meeting which respects that tradition and enables local governments to get voters to weigh in and sign off on various proposals that are generally decided in early March, will simply be one more adjustment added to all the others that have come along since last March. For the GNAT-TV News Project, I'm Andrew OKeefe.